it's something that I like to do, and because it allows me to think about things.
Things? Like what?
The soul.
Seriously?
What?
I don't think that's important. Don't you have other things to do?
I mean, yes, but it's still fun to do.
Okay, so what have you been thinking about?
Well, I started with a very simple question. Is the soul individual or collective? It's a powerful distinction that affects whether or not we are individuals.
Okay, still not sure why this is important, but go on.
It's important because questions like this have started wars, conflicts, murders, stories, love, and everything in between. Finding an answer would, in theory, seem to resolve the issues we face.
Well, what are you learning?
Well, one philosopher thought that individuation was an issue, but that dude also claimed that substance was spiritual as well as physical.
Okay, so?
So, when a substance is spiritual, that means the substance must come from something spiritual, not just the physical. Thus, it would suggest we have spiritual matter and form separate from the body. It would have to stand alone on its own principles.
Okay, still not seeing the issue here.
How well do you know the ascension of the forms?
What?
Never mind. Basically, if everything is a form of some sort of substance that isn't physical, then we have to answer the question about how such a thing differentiates from the next level down. So, in the case of physical things, we can go from a tree to a limb to a twig. But if we have to start from the bottom, we then run into the issue with where to differentiate the line or where to start. So back to the twig. Do we identify the form as the twig, the wood, or process by which it came about?
I think you're overthinking it.
Welcome to philosophy.
So is this all it's about?
Well, yes and no. Philosophy has real-world implications.
Phenomenal. So, whoever was insane enough to claim that we don't exist physically, but are only spiritual, whatever, does this actually have implications for how we live?
Bonaventure. No and yes.
What?
Bonaventure was the person who made the claim. He was a Franciscan scholar who lived in the Middle Ages, I think around 1250 or something like that. Spent most of his time studying angels and, just say, St. Francis. He was also a Platonic-based theologian who decided he didn't like Aquinas. Basically, he had beef, and Bonaventure's answer was, screw you, it's all metaphysical. And he didn't really claim that everything was spiritual. It's more of a composite between form and matter, which we call substance. And the implication for how we live each day is tied into purpose and meaning. You gonna ask?
I'm afraid to.
Well, I'm explaining anyway. If the individuation of the soul is based in a spiritual reality, then everything should be seeking to ascend into the one, or in this case, closer to God.
Why am I still listening to this?
Because neither of us has any better things to do.
Go on.
If the purpose of the soul is to make an ascent to God, then it affects how we have to act and behave in everyday life. Aristotle posited that we have to pursue virtue. Confucius argued self-cultivation. Bonaventure decided that it's prayer, contemplation of the vestiges or forms, and a lot of heavy-duty meditation.
I like meditation.
Through that process, we develop a closer relationship with the one, or God. Other philosophers thought something similar.
Like?
Augustine, Aquinas, Boethius, pretty much anyone else from the Eastern traditions.
Ah, so there's a whole history of Looney Tunes in this then.
At least we haven't talked about how you've come to understand cause and effect.
Is that a problem?
Let me introduce you to Immanuel Kant.